What links falafel with mobile payments on the blockchain? Give up? Me too. Welcome to Curious Futurist, the show that explores how today's technological and economic trends are shaping tomorrow's world. I'm your host, the Curious Futurist. The falafel seller test is what this week's guest calls the test they use to try and work out how easy a new technology is to be used in the mainstream. As they put it, if something is simple enough that your falafel seller down the street can use it, then it's simple enough that anyone can use. Now, who is this week's guest? Well, this week's guest is Mark Smargon. He's the CEO and co-founder of a company called Fuse. And what Fuse is doing is they're building a mobile digital payments system that's designed to be so intuitive that anyone can set this up, anyone can use it, without really having any knowledge of how blockchain works whatsoever. Now, if this sounds a little complicated and you're not sure what the point of this is, don't worry, we're going to cover this in the interview. We're going to be talking about who this is for. We're going to be talking some examples of where it's being used, where it's being trialed in different places around the world, a little bit about how this works, a little bit of the in and outs about how it works on the blockchain to create your own cryptocurrency for your own community-based economy. The fascinating implications of this are that this could be a real boost to economic activity in all kinds of places around the world that maybe don't have access to things like Visa or PayPal. And also, it could be a real boon to those poorer neighborhoods in richer countries, all across Europe and all across North America, where a lot of people perhaps can't get access to credit, or where store owners can't really afford to pay the Visa fees they need to accept credit payments. So the implications are really quite far-reaching, and for what this could do to help stimulate the global economy in the years ahead. Are you ready to meet Mark? Hi Mark, thanks for joining us. I wanted to talk to you because your company that you're the CEO of, Fuse, is very interesting and might be a little bit, I think a lot of people find it interesting, might be a bit confusing in sort of how it works for some people. So I just wondered, how would you summarize what your company Fuse does for people who aren't like super familiar with blockchain?
Yeah, so I think the best way to describe it is by giving an example, Stripe or Square, or probably people are more familiar with those companies that usually sit on top of Visa, and they bundle a bunch of services together and offer this bundle at a very clear and basically you pay like a flat fee and get all the products out of the box, very straightforward, very easy to understand. So they had a lot of traction and popularity. So we're offering a decentralized version of that. Why decentralized, you ask, and who needs it? So those companies actually don't operate outside of, mostly North America, parts of Europe, maybe Japan. Some of those companies, like payment processors, are there, but it's a really fragmented space, very expensive, like they hit 3%. It's far from being used worldwide. And we want to offer a simpler version. I'm not saying more complicated, but a version that can outcompete those offering on every level. Cheaper, easier to operate. You can launch it everywhere. So it's really on those points we want to compete with those giants, not necessarily on decentralization. That's not the goal. The goal is to beat them at their own game.
So this is a kind of a payment solution, right, for various different people. So yeah, you've said already in terms of like regions that it could be for people who are outside of those regions commonly served by, Visa, commonly served by very sophisticated banking systems, and commonly served by services like Stripe. But within those kind of regions, like, who is this solution for? What kind of person would need to use your payment service?
Yeah, so it's not for consumers. It's not consumer facing, but also not Stripe or Square or Plaid or even PayPal. You're not used to paying PayPal a fee. But if you're a merchant, you're really aware of the fees and how it works. You also get your money in the bank on a specific date. It's not instant. There's a lot of settlement that's going on behind the scenes. Sometimes it's more expensive and takes more time, depending on the service, depending on the jurisdiction. In crypto, getting paid is a very seamless thing. So payments is kind of like an out-of-the-box feature of pretty much any token or blockchain, or it really comes very useful with everything you need to basically avoid going through any third party if you want to accept payments. So this is a killer feature in my opinion, and this is probably why Bitcoin white paper started with the sentence, we want to build an electronic cash system. And really, they didn't say we want to replace Stripe, Square, Play. They wanted to replace the dollar. But until you can make everybody use Bitcoin for payments, there's a lot of things we need to do with this technology. One of those things is really offer a bank grade capabilities in the palm of everybody's hands, or more accurately phones. So this is really the disruptive moment where even where you don't have a banking infrastructure, you can offer services like Stripe, Square, Play, getting paid, accept payments. It's more interesting on the merchant side. The consumer, you just want a good payment experience. So our philosophy here is not to try to show them Bitcoin or any like crypto specific UI. Really try to show them, give them the experience they're used to already. The people starting to pay more and more on the phone. There is a way that pretty much all of those apps work if it's a smartphone. And we want to replicate that, not necessarily try to teach them this is Bitcoin or this is Ethereum, this is a volatile asset, you need to pay fees, you need to understand what's a public key, private key. So no, we want to abstract, it's financial abstraction. We want to use this as an infrastructure, and the consumer will basically wouldn't care if it's running on this blockchain, that blockchain, Visa or Plaid. It's not really interesting from the consumer perspective. They just want to use it with as less friction as possible.
So do you have any examples of the kinds of vendors who might be using it already, or who you're in discussions with to be using it?
Yeah.
Sort of what they're using it for.
Yeah. So imagine a company that wants to create a loyalty system, and they want to give incentive for everybody to deposit money. And instead of charging 3% every time they're paying or something like that, let's say that they're paying 1% to deposit money, and then every purchase they get 2% cashback. So you can really innovate on the business models, and it's really easy because it's a contract that defines all the business logic within your specific economy. So a loyalty program is essentially a small microeconomy. Nowadays, it's a big business. It always been a big business. People say it's about 30% of the retail market, and people mostly do it. Companies, merchants, retailers, they're doing this with coupons, or they're doing this with like paper-based vouchers and stuff like that. Air miles, for instance, it's digital, but still it's running by an airline company, which is not really affordable for any retailer. So let's say that somebody like a smaller retailer wants to compete with a big retailer. It takes the Fuse product, and they set up their own economy. They create a currency. They can define what would be business logic. And this runs in places like, for instance, right now, a company in Thailand is doing an integration. They want to be able to pay a music festival, which is cool that this happens in Thailand right now with the corona. So good for them. So like briefly, basically, people deposit money into a wallet, and then go and pay and get a special incentive to use that specific wallet because they get the cash back, or they deposit money and the money is worth a bit more, like 5%, or like any small incentive you can give to people, and then you can actually manage it. You can see in real time how many people are engaged and how much value you created, and you can optimize it over time. So it's not like paper where you usually, it sits aside. Here you can actually, okay, if you pay on Fridays, you'll get extra discount. Like you can play with those loyalty programs, with those. And when I say loyalty, I may be minimizing the importance of this. This is basically like the central bank doing economic incentives to support a certain behavior. A business can do the same. Discount is a lot of times, very similar to economic incentive. They give you the 30% incentive to like go to this place instead of that place, and that's very effective incentive. We want to give those tools to people that usually, do it with paper. But even closer to home, in Liverpool, there's a company called People that have a service called Roost, and they're doing a really cool pound stablecoin where you can go with this pound stablecoin and pay in a pub. And they create an ecosystem in Liverpool that its entire purpose is to build those services around this pound stablecoin and retain more value in the community. So even without the loyalty programs, even as just an alternative payment infrastructure, or you can call it maybe a social currency, and I think those types of currencies, those are alternative means of exchange that are just there to promote a specific social goal or economical goal.
So what is it in the case of the Liverpool example then? What's the benefit for them of doing that? So you replace cash, you have digital money instead, and in this case it's a pound-based stablecoin token. So what's the benefit of that in a sort of developed economy?
Yeah, so you need to look at this in the context of an ecosystem of services where every time you go to a McDonald's and use your credit card to pay, most of this money goes to basically leaves the economy. There were a lot of research made about that. If you create a system where people are being able to pay, and it's going to a local business, and it's using a system that keeps the money inside, and moreover, a system that lets you not only keep the money inside, but also let you move it around P2P at a very low cost. So maybe you pay $15 at McDonald's. Here, those $15 continue to circulate. So you can actually end up with, those $15 break apart until you actually generate 15 times more economic activity. And the amazing thing is that 15 transactions on Fuses are still cheaper than doing one transaction on Visa. So there's a lot of room to incentivize more economic activity to keep this circulating. It's not our invention, something that, all theoretical economists are usually, it's something that is acknowledged by economists, but economists don't have macroeconomic data in real time in the financial system the way it works today. Nobody knows how you can create a better digital payment infrastructure. Everybody knows that WeChat, for instance, kind of achieves that, but at a cost. So we try to understand how we can, reach a world where we want the WeChat experience and frictionless P2P, low cost, very effective at generating, and sustaining more economic activity. But on the other hand, not like one big brother top-down, company that holds all the money and makes all the data and charges all the fees, which is kind of basically like Visa or WeChat. It's one company that usually is making the data about the transaction. Usually they're managing risk behind the scenes. We don't have risk here. It's a different, like absolutely different infrastructure. This is why I was saying alternative means of exchange.
So how does this take out the risk? What are the normal risks, and how does this kind of get rid of those?
when you pay with your credit card, there's a acquiring bank and a issuing bank. The bank where the merchant is managing his account, and the bank that the consumer is managing his account. And the acquiring bank is usually taking a risk. I can tell you a simple example. Uber is actually doing something similar. Every time you want to enter a cab, they're actually doing some kind of a credit score behind the scenes and making sure that you're cleared, because you don't want to like try to enter a taxi and somebody, like when you inside, somebody tells you your credit card is declined. So they're essentially giving you a loan in real time. They're giving you a credit assessment in real time. Every time you enter your taxis, just so you have this frictionless payment experience. You just enter the cab, leaving the cab, that's it, you're paid. Behind the scenes, there's consumer protection. That is a big part of the reason why those systems are so expensive. Visa charges 1%, PayPal charges 2.9, Stripe, Square, they all charge 2.9, because you can always, they can risk upon themselves that the consumer can always call and cancel the deal. There's also chargeback, which increases the cost. On blockchain systems, it works very differently than Visa. Visa is a pool payment system from the 60s, very old technology. They innovate with, with like security measures and stuff you build on top of it. But in the end of the day, it's a very different system than how blockchains usually work. Blockchains is really push payments as opposed to Visa, which is pull payments. And push payments is really like sending an email. Somebody can hack my account and send an email on my behalf, but you can't really do a chargeback, like technically, unless you hack an account and I don't know, doing something out of the ordinary. Basically, unless you're stealing people's money, there's no risk management. It's a bit like with cash. When you're paying with cash, you don't have anybody to call to ask them like for a chargeback, right? So this is what we eliminate from the system, and it generates maybe other problems, but on the infrastructure level, not doing risk management, not dealing with fraud detection, just because of the nature and the architecture of this of this technology, is really something that Visa can't compete with, because it's an absolutely different model.
Well, so you mentioned earlier that essentially with your system, people can effectively create their own currency. And when we say people, we mean sort of vendors or a community can create its own currency. Now, this is where it gets a bit complicated, I think. How does this work? Because when I look at your website, it mentions Fuse tokens and Ethereum tokens. Now, I think this is more in the background, but it talks about using stablecoin, and it talks about, if I go on there, I could create a wallet, create my own kind of token, essentially out of thin air, as far as I can see. So how do all these pieces fit together, I guess is the thing. Like if I'm, let's say I'm in Liverpool and I want to be set up a community like the one that's being set up.
Yeah,
I can go in and I can create my own currency. If I were using Fuse, I could do that. How does that work then in terms of creating a currency?
Yeah, so I think it's confusing because we need to look at this as a very early space where people are kind of building it from the bottom. So you kind of have a lot of building blocks, but you don't have the assembled thing yet. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of people that assembled really nice products, but they're not really been focused on consumer adoption. And this is the real difference with Fuse, because basically what we're saying is that those building blocks that people use for yield farming, for doing like crazy financial instruments on Ethereum, they're really interesting as experiments, but the real innovation there is how we can apply them to the real world. So stablecoins, since last year, ERC20 tokens, or basically the same kind of tokens that our platform allows you to create, they actually been the biggest in terms, like the biggest value that was moved on in any blockchain in the crypto space was in stable coins. Most of those stable coins are ERC20 on Ethereum. So I'm just giving you an example of a building block. Stable coins is just one building block that we provide. So you don't really need to create your own stable coin, but create your own stable coin is as easy as creating your own token on Fuse. You don't want to create a token on Fuse, you can use DAI USDC, one of the widely adopted stable coins. You want those stable coins to be usable by consumers. You want to airdrop those stable coins. Maybe you live in a country where you don't have an ecosystem like that and you want to create one. So this I would say is really easy to explain to crypto people. Let's take it, let's take it a step further. Let's say that a business wants to create their own stable coin. Let's say that I have my car wash and I want to have my car bucks or something like that. And every time somebody buys, you give him $5 or pounds as a discount or something like that, and then he can redeem it. If you have a gas station, maybe you want to give people a cashback in the form of a different token where they can spend it only in the convenience store. I can go on and on. The use case is so universal and it's so easy to understand for every consumer. We want to make those building blocks and people can just assemble their own model. Doing it on a blockchain is complicated. So this is why it's a game for developers nowadays. And everything I'm telling you, everybody can build it. What we want to do is to make it approachable to non-technical people. Let's say if we try to lower costs, one of the biggest costs is to hire a developer that will build this from scratch. Well, in crypto, you don't need a developer that will build ERC20. You have an ERC20, and you don't need a developer to build a stable coin. You can already use one of the existing stable coins. So this is why it's so useful and makes a lot of sense not to really build your own contracts, but not only to use existing contracts like airdrop contracts and AMMs and decentralized exchanges, and all of those are different types of contracts already being used on Ethereum, and we can deliver those products to people that are not technical. And I think this is like increases the circle of people that can use those tools. And this was our approach to really build this from the bottom up. If we would just, offer like a payment service for enterprise, it wouldn't be really interesting because the fact that it's self-service makes it really fast to deploy, easy to reach pretty much any place in the world. And this is why we had like 300 communities so far created on our studio, because it's really easy and anybody can do it. So we have like a lot of people experimenting, like a small sandbox. So that's really the approach.
So what's the cost to them of setting up a studio or setting up their own kind of economy?
Yes, it's only all the costs on Fuse are on-chain fees. So every time you create a contract, you're basically depends on how complicated it is. If you want to create your own currency, it costs like right now with the fees like $10, something like that. If you want, it was more. It's actually went down a lot. We optimized it a bit. But doing transaction themselves, it's 1 cent per transaction. So, you can have thousands of transactions and it's like pay-per usage, like any cloud provider. Every information you want to put in the ledger, you need to pay 1 cent. So it's really straightforward, really easy to anticipate the costs. And it's doesn't matter how much value you actually have. If it's $1 or $1 million, it will be always 1 cent. And I think that's like something really unique when you approach merchants. And in general, if you want to create value on top of Visa business models, there's no value that you can create because they're taking a big chunk of your profits. If you're selling grocery, you're selling food in a grocery store, you can't afford paying 3% to PayPal or Stripe or Square. You can use Visa, but the really disappointing thing with payment cards is usually that Starbucks and McDonald's are paying less than a local grocery store, because you create less risk if you have like more. You have more leverage. You can get more competitive rates. So this is a big equalizer. Like anybody can get paid using this system.
Yeah. So just to clarify, when you say 1 cent per transaction, so that is, so anytime somebody uses this to purchase something, actually make a transaction within the community, it costs 1 cent to the vendor, and that's 1 cent. It's not 1%. It's 1 cent, right? It's never more than 1 cent. So that seems to be incredibly cheap to use.
Yeah, so we actually worked our way backwards, how we can create an ecosystem that will replace Visa. It's not our Visa is our enemy. On the contrary, we need Visa as a way to onboard users. But most of the world didn't hear about Visa, not really. Like if you look at South America and Asia and Africa, those places don't have Visa and probably never will be. Will have like basically leapfrogging into probably mobile payments and stuff like that. Africa, for instance, you have SMSs that people use to transfer value. We want to basically offer a superior way, but one company can't build something like that. You need an ecosystem of companies, all working together on the same goal. And this is really the approach that we had to build an ecosystem that can build this from the bottom up and offer business model that is superior, and it's quite counterintuitive, because it's just not the way people, and nobody complains, nobody says Visa is charging you 1%, that's too much. Everybody are willing to pay. And I think you can create those business models on top of our infrastructure. You can charge your merchants 1%. Maybe it's even makes a lot of sense. But in some cases, let's say somebody wants to buy scooters in the middle of nowhere, and they want to create a payment wallet that allows you to rent those scooters. So really, really simple, really, really straightforward. They want to compete with scooter vendors that usually take a high fee, and Visa in the middle taking a high fee. Here, all you need is payments and reputation. That's it. And you get the wallet out of the box, and you get the payments out of the box, and the reputation out of the box. You only need to pay those on-chain fees. So that's a really different approach than Visa.
So I guess what we're talking about is providing an alternative for Visa, not to disrupt Visa in existing markets, but to provide a substitute for Visa in areas where Visa really can't be used or doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's definitely disrupting Visa in where they operate currently, for sure. Because if you look right now if you look at places in Europe, even in North America, it's very, very cash-based economy. Japan. So I would argue that the West, like the most advanced countries, are maybe with some exceptions, maybe like Scandinavia, but countries like Germany, US, they use a lot of credit cards, but and maybe it comes on the expense of cash a little bit, like useless cash, but it's not really. I couldn't say that it's a credit card economy. Credit cards are used like a lot, but I think really there's a lot of places in UK that not people don't even have a bank account, for sure, in America. So it's really like when we look at this, we have a pilot in Spain, for instance. People in Europe are still doing cash handouts, with basically cash, with euros. In America, for instance, you have food stamps, so it's really easy to do welfare like that. or donations. There's no really a way to do it without going through Visa in Europe. If you want to give cash handouts, you have on either giving cash or Visa. And people still just get cash for donations and go buy groceries at the grocery store with it. So we have a pilot in Spain, for instance, in Sevilla, one of the poorest places in Sevilla, neighborhood, and especially now with the Corona, people don't want to use cash. Digital vouchers are expensive. You need payment cards. You need to pay Visa. You need to deal with a lot of logistics. In the end of the day, you just want to give people a coupon. This is, 10 euros, go buy some food. Here are the places you can buy. Here's the expiration date. With cash, you can do that.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. In that case, that's quite a tangible example, a good one. Is that an example where they'd be using a stable coin type token?
So there's a company called Wikibank. You can see it on our website. They're running a stable coin pegged to euro. It's not about loyalty. It's very easy to understand. There's no learning curve, so nobody installs a wallet and then tries to figure out how to use it or what's the numbers mean. If it's pounds or euros, and you don't need to calculate like weird exchange rates and no crypto jargon. This was really something that we call it falafel seller test. If a falafel seller, this is because we're based in Israel, so in Spain it would be maybe the paella, I don't know. But we need people to be able, like the falafel seller test is how do we know that this is ready for mainstream adoption? If your falafel seller can open an account, that means that we're there. We reached it. Like this is how WeChat works. WeChat is P2P, only it goes through the Chinese government, but it's actually working P2P. So any merchant can give you a QR code, and anyone can scan and pay, and there's no like underwriting cost or dealing with people that install like a special chip and give you like a payment reader, a card reader, and
just to clarify, in Spain, this example, when we talk about cash handouts and replacing those, so we're talking about like welfare payments, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it would be some sort of local authority community issuing these things to local residents who have their wallets on their smartphones.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not really a local authority, and this is part of our vision. So there's Fuse, and there's companies like Wikibank that are basically running their payment service on our infrastructure. We're basically, building everything we've built for them, for companies like Wikibank. They're actually not a government entity, and this is really the key here. You can think about them as a local franchise. Why I'm using this word? Because we want them to make money, even though it's
like a social program.
Yeah, even though it's like cash handouts, it's not. It's a for-profit company, and I believe the charity needs to be for-profit. In the end of the day, giving one-time, handout is perfectly fine, but you don't want that. You want to help people. You want to have donors. You want to show the donors what their donation has made, because you can basically show them now if it's not paper. You want to charge the merchants some money, so it doesn't need to be a high sum, but you are providing a service, and you do offer a lot of footwork, and you make it approachable to consumers, and you let consumers use it on a daily basis. So it becomes something that is much more than a food stamp, which is not something people get with a lot of pride,
True.
You want.
Well, I mean, the network aspect makes sense. I just can't work out where the money comes from.
Then so you want to charge the merchants a fee?
Oh no, not for you or that. I mean, we were talking about handouts to people.
Yeah, so donor gives money to Wikibank, and Wikibank delivers this through the wallet digitally to people that need
so it's
it.
like a charity.
Yeah, and they're charging money from the merchants. And we can actually share a video of how it looks in action. There's a few thousand euros that they already sent there through the pilot, and we're currently ramping up with more features and ability.
Is that something we could put in the description box below the video then to link to?
Yeah.
That'd be
So
great. Yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just the ability to showcase, even if it's on a small scale, those types of pilots is really what our focus been in the last few months, because we don't want one community of 1 million people and say, listen, here we're taking a bite out of Visa. Look at how many transactions we have. I don't think that's realistic. The approach is really showing real money and real people in everyday scenarios, buying coffee at the store, paying at the music festival. We have a company that is doing a soccer fan club where you can buy stuff on the stadium with this, and a loyalty system in a gas station, and even a village in the Amazonas that has like a paper currency called Verde. And they came to us and said, we don't have a lot of people there. It's like 1,000 people, but we use like a paper. Everybody have smartphones, and there's 3G, even though it's in Brazil, in the Amazonas. And you can basically replace the paper currency that they have with the digital version. Those are the types of places where you couldn't really, there was no sense in building or even approaching them about digital transformation, you know? Just the ability of them to be able to empower them to do it for themselves, it just opens up a world of possibilities. It's very universal. In fact, you can run something like that in UK, in Spain, in the Amazonas, in Thailand. Is really unique. And
yeah,
this
universal sounds right. It sounds like it really is applicable in many situations. What are this soccer stadium? What's the soccer stadium using it for? Is that like a loyalty rewards type program?
Yeah, so this is a company called BLX. They actually invested in us and exploring different products. They're a software company with a track record in crypto, and they were doing. They were basically looking into those fan clubs as kind of their own microeconomy. If you heard about Barcelona doing a fan token. And this basically comes out of every club in Europe, and became a bit popular. But buying the token is one thing; using it is a whole different thing. And the challenges that you need to solve, and the infrastructure that you need to make it usable for the average soccer fan. That's not something that that makes sense for Barcelona to build, for instance, right? I'm just giving this example as but you can basically go to the clubs with less money and tell them, listen, with the Corona, you need business models that are a bit more sustainable. People can go to the stadiums. Maybe we can support the players through the app. When you come to the games, maybe you want to buy stuff, it will be through the app. Any way to retain value, to monetize. It's just like any digital product. Everybody needs it. It's like a website, right? But when you're a small football team, even if you're like a medium football team, I'm doing this for most of my life. I've been building those digital interfaces and products. And I would say that a football club that wants to build a wallet with integration to payments need to invest at least a few millions. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but a medium club can't really, they need the iOS version, Android version, they need the licensing, they need the integrating to external services, ERP systems. There's so much overhead, and nobody would even start thinking about investing that sum. And if you're investing less than this, it will not work. It will just not work. You can't compete with Barcelona with like a cheap product. You know what I mean?
With you, they can just set it up. They plug right into your ecosystem that you already have, and they're ready to go.
Yeah, it's a really good way to reach from 0 to 100 to reach customers. That's really like my advice to any company, any startup in the world. Like if you can if I can give one advice, is reach customers fast. You need to reach to get feedback fast, and time to market is probably the most important thing. Your startup gets a different life after it starts, you know, understanding who are their clients and talking with their clients and stuff like that. So for us, one part is reaching clients fast. The other part is how do I keep owning this infrastructure? Because with Wix and you know, with Shopify, I can reach customers fast. But then if I'm successful, I probably need to leave. They're charging 5%, or I don't remember exactly, but they're charging a certain percentage. Also, they're owning all the data. They're owning all the customers. In the end of the day, you have some, you know, ability to customize, but in the end of the day, it's still the same database for all Shopify users, same database for all Wix users. You're not owning any infrastructure or IP of the underlying, you know, product that you basically earning money from, earning a living from. You're not owning it. With payment systems, it's really important that you have some ownership, some control, some assurances. Maybe, you know, they can't really trust it yet, but over time they will understand that this is probably more secure than any other bank, because it's not built by any one entity that sits in a room in some bank. It's built by not only built by thousands of people, and there's a lot of, you know, eyes into the code, but it's also battle tested with millions of dollars in production. So it's not like we're testing this on you. You're sharing this infrastructure. You're basically standing on the shoulders of Ethereum, you can say.
Well, yeah, let's discuss that briefly then. I think for a lot of people, Ethereum, they think of it just as a currency, digital currency. Or token or what have you, similar to Bitcoin. But in fact, what we're talking about here is Ethereum as a sort of open source network, right? An open source infrastructure where you have all these people, developers and so on, working together to build all these solutions on the blockchain. And so essentially, if I understand correctly, then the Fuse offering, what you do is, as you kind of said here, built on Ethereum. Yeah. So therefore, when you say, so people aren't just plugging into kind of Fuse, they're plugging into the whole Ethereum kind of ecosystem, the security of that, right?
No, I'll explain when I say Ethereum what I mean. So it's like blockchain. Sometimes you say it, but you mean different stuff.
Yeah, okay.
So when I say Bitcoin, or like I can say Bitcoin is a network, Bitcoin is a currency, and Bitcoin is like a product or an open source code. When I say Ethereum, I don't mean Ethereum as a currency.
No.
And I don't mean even Ethereum as a network.
Okay.
I mainly talk about Ethereum as a standard, like HTTP. When you subscribe to this standard, you're automatically interoperable with everything in the Ethereum ecosystem. Maybe I'm oversimplifying, but
I think that's good. I think simple is good, to be honest.
Yeah. So ERC20 is basically like saying this is how we in humanity describe tradable assets that are fungible. And this is NFTs. This is a contract for how do we describe assets that are non-fungible. Assets that are fungible are more similar to cash, non-fungible more similar to collectibles or diplomas or stuff like that, and they can live under the same roof. And this is something that Bitcoin doesn't know how to do. Bitcoin really focuses less about generating those standards, and I know because we've been building a protocol similar to that on Bitcoin. And Bitcoin was a really good idea, but it's more powerful as a way to avoid capital controls by governments and censorship resistance. That would be like their main feature. Not privacy, not scalability, not the fact that you can represent real world assets on it. None of it. It's really to create a new digital gold and a new economic system, a new like alternative economic internet system. Ethereum endgame is to actually blend into or improve how finance is being done on the back end, on the front end, like completely go business case by business case and change it. Nobody on Ethereum, it's just a different mentality. Nobody there is saying there should be one currency, or we shouldn't try to play with billions of dollars with untested code. The mentality there is let's run and let's break stuff. And it's really on the fringes where you find those very interesting experiments that can reach customers, and people can, what happens lately overnight, suddenly you have like billions of dollars in an untested protocol, and people get a lot of signals out of that. This is working. This is something people like. This is a bad approach. Don't go there. And we don't have enough experimentation like that on Bitcoin. Right. So this is why I'm saying like there's more developer adoption on Ethereum than all the other ecosystems together. And other ecosystems are actually building on top of Ethereum. If you look at Binance, Cosmos, Polkadot, all of those projects have an Ethereum interoperability in the pipeline. So I would say that it's not the best protocol, but just like HTTP, it's good enough. People are trying to do HTTP2 for years. So people said about HTTP, it's good enough. We can build our internet on top of that. So Ethereum is kind of like the internet of value right now. And we'll see how it goes with regulation and stuff like that. But I would say that we have enough, like now in 2020, we can really say that this technology reached a point where people are no longer innovating on the base layer, trying to build like, there's still a lot of blockchain projects, but probably we will see less and less solutions that try to really build an Ethereum killer or solve a scalability problem from a base layer perspective, and more projects that are building the second layer. And DeFi is really only about stuff you can build with contracts on mainnet. Right now, it's really something that is focused on very narrow like group of people that are experimenting, about 1 million people. You can see everything because it's transparent. You can see how much value it's there. There's like something like $12 billion there, something like that. And this is not something that we had before. So if you can trust it with $12 billion, we can move ahead and start pushing it for consumers. Because consumers, in the end of the day, they really need somebody that will a friendly face, that will do customer service. And for those operators, we want to make the life easier, because they're using paper, and offering them a digital option is just like a no-brainer. They will do it with Fuse or without it. They will move to digital.
Okay, so looking at this, how we talked about data. So one of the differences here with the way that you operate compared to, we mentioned things like Wix and I can't remember but the e-commerce platforms. So they will keep the data. What happens to the data that's generated with the transactions that run on your ecosystem? Where does that data go? Yeah. Like, are there any privacy, security issues, things that people might be concerned about?
Yeah. Definitely, one of the main topics that we try to tackle is how do we not store all the private information of our customers, and how we create a system where we can touch money. So everything is non-custodial. If somebody deposits money, it goes from the third party straight to the consumer. It doesn't go through the operator unless the operator wants it explicitly to work differently. By default, all the data is generated on the phone, stored locally, and voluntarily shared by the consumer. When a consumer adds information, and this is more of a vision thing because it will take us a time to reach this, but that's definitely the race. How we remove friction for stuff like KYC, how we let users
know your customer, right? Just to be clear. Sorry.
How do we remove friction? How do we make it easier for consumers to join services without, today it's like very difficult. You need to upload papers and stuff like that. How do we do like reusable KYC? Yeah, so how do we verify that you're a real person, maybe even without KYC? How do we create a credit score for you without a credit scoring company? Because those are things that are atomic. That means that I can create a piece of content that is atomically attached to one-to-one to your account. So the same exact crypto you use to safeguard your private money will be used to store, manage, share your private information. And that's really interesting, like part of lending, for instance. Right now it's non-collateralized. Sorry, it's fully collateralized, over-collateralized. You want in the future to be able to think about new models. There's already a lot of thinking and designing. How do we pull it off? How do we let user put your reputation as a collateral, sort of?
Wow.
And those things are only a matter of time, because those are open public schemas, just like you had the ERC20, which became very popular because people just wanted to trade tokens. That there was a very strong demand and push for adoption with ERC20, and now there's a lot of network effect because I'm using ERC20. Suddenly, it's actually like few dollars, and I have a token that I can do all those cool stuff, and all the wallets in the world support it, all the exchanges support it, for instance, Uniswap. This is a very compelling reason to use ERC20. The same goes for credit scoring in general, as a standard, as an infrastructure. Suddenly becomes like another tool. You don't really need to store this information, but because you have a way to share it and store it with the consumers and share it across different services, suddenly it gets interesting. If we go back to the company in Kenya, Safaricom, that is doing payments using SMSs. So you know how they do credit scoring?
No.
I'm sure that that this is like a novelty, but they actually go on, like there's a company there that gives you a loan by going on your SMSs and reads them, and they can actually figure out if you're like they're basically building you a credit score. This is a nice idea, but think about like who knows, like your wallet actually then generates so much data. About you. For instance, Visa doesn't know your GPS when you go to buy something. They don't know that you're physically near the business that you want to pay. It's really easy to lower risk, do stuff that just require, physically being in a place and sending a cryptographic proof and somebody else to receive it. So there's so much stuff you can do with credit scoring with those systems, because they generate a lot of data. We don't want to hold that data. That's the important thing.
Okay, so to be clear, this is the wider ecosystem we're talking about, right? When we're talking about these ideas, it's not stuff that you are developing specifically, but it's something that you could build on.
Yeah, exactly. So our wallet, what we've built, stores all metadata on IPFS and on the device, and lets users share this information. The standards are built by companies in this space, how to store private information, how to share private information. And it probably take, it's just like with any other thing you build in this space, it takes time for adoption, for trial and error. It's not something that I expect to see fully adopted in the next year, but there's a really strong push on identity, and all of this space is just waiting for a solution, because even companies like Microsoft are involved in trying to think about those schemas, and everything I'm talking about is not something people were doing until before blockchain or crypto. It's really converging a lot of different researches and products. IPFS, for instance, is something that is from the file sharing space and torrents, and you somehow combining it with digital identity and apply it to a use case like credit scoring. naturally it will require a lot of iterations to replace what we have today, which is broken.
What we have today is broken.
Yeah, for sure.
What makes you say that? I mean, a lot of people think this. A lot of people say this. I'm just thinking, what's the main sign of things today being broken that you see?
Yeah. So I think the most clear example is credit scoring in the US. The fact that it's using your name and the social security numbers, so it's really easy to impersonate you. So that became a problem. So I don't remember the numbers, but 1 in 5 people in the US don't get a loan because of a mixed identity or something. In other places, you don't have a credit score at all. In Israel, we don't have a credit score system at all, for better or for worse. But it's really, if you don't have a credit scoring problem, you don't have any way to offer services outside of your bank. Think about it. Like there's only one company that will give you, like I call it closed financial garden. They give you all the services, but they don't let you out. So basically, yeah, so you can go to a different bank and they'll probably ask this bank for all this data. It's possible, but still there's a lot of friction in doing this. And if anybody wants to give you, help, or in America, it's actually possible because you have companies that you can ask for a credit score. Even if you want to, rent a house, you want to limit risk and stuff like that. A user has no way to share this information with you unless you go to a credit provider and buy this information. So it's not really a
good example.
Yeah, when I'm saying it's broken, I'm saying it's not working for everybody.
No, definitely. I mean, obviously it works for some people, otherwise it wouldn't exist, but there's a lot of people that it doesn't work for. That's very true. I mean, certainly across Europe, there are quite a few examples of where it can be hard for people moving between countries to open a bank account. Because partly of regulations, partly because they can't establish people's identities, adequately. Where, from what you're saying, this big push in identity could be a great way to solve that problem. You just, you have this identity, you share it when you need it.
I think we touched the issue with credit scoring, but that's actually like maybe a bigger problem. Maybe it's further down the road. Right now, the most immediate problem is the fact that in the internet world, you really have one way to the standard is asking Facebook for your private information, is asking Google for your private information, or asking Apple, and that's really the first thing that crypto tries to build, a protocol that allows you to basically avoid going through Facebook or any third parties. It's called OAuth. And they're actually, monetized OAuth, you can call it. Because
how do we spell that? Sorry.
Oh, like the protocol is called OAuth. When you go to, when you try to use, I don't know, an app on your phone, you log in using Facebook or you log in using Google. You're using a protocol called OAuth.
I didn't know that. Right. Okay.
So this is a protocol that was developed in W3C, which was like the internet standards body, but Facebook actually monetized it because what they're doing is letting you use they basically can track you outside of Facebook, which is like and they're powering a big chunk of the internet. So every time somebody logs into somewhere using your credentials, they're basically using you use your Facebook credentials, you're actually asking Facebook to give this information to a third party. And what if I just want to give my password and say people get the data from me? I don't need to ask Facebook for permission. So that's really the push, and there's a lot of work. So it's really converging between different infrastructure upgrades. There's a reason people call it Web3. Because it's a new way to identify yourself, where Web 2 it was mostly communication with the server, but how do I give my credentials to you without a server in the middle if I want just to send you money or share a document with you or something like that.
Well, if we get sort of widespread adoption of some sort of blockchain-based identity scheme, is this a threat potentially to the business models of the likes of Google and Facebook, who seem to rely on monetizing data?
So I think it's really it's really not something like Google and Facebook and Amazon and Apple. They're not a monolith. They don't really focus on one. Like a lot of them are maybe focus on one business, or they have like a super specific focus. Most of them are basically doing advertising. But if you go to Amazon, for instance, it starts to get tricky. There's one part that is doing storage and another part that is doing retail, and the storage is kind of funding the retail.
True.
With Facebook, for instance, and Google, it's really hardcore advertising business. But still, you have cloud services, and you have Instagram, which start like there's a lot of different business models there. I don't think we're really tackling those companies. I think there's stuff you can build with this technology that will solve a lot of the problems that they create. But I think every business problem needs a different technological solution. People are usually saying blockchain this and blockchain that, everything on the blockchain, everything decentralized. And you might say that blockchain is a new type of database, so it's really useful and you can use it in a lot of scenarios. But just like in some scenarios you prefer to use Mongo, in another scenario you prefer to use Postgres. So with the blockchain, the same thing exactly. One company builds a solution and they have like a specific ecosystem they want to build to really take an existing business model like the payment space and change it and improve it. That would probably not solve any other big problems that we have, like Facebook, which is an entirely different effort. I would say that what we're doing is very similar to what Facebook is doing with Libra and Novi. They rebranded their wallet that they're building, and they want to make it used by merchants. It's for merchant adoption. They wanted to use with it's going to be used with stable coins. It's supposed to be a public blockchain. So there's a lot of similarities in their approach and our approach, but they're creating their own ecosystem. We try to subscribe to the Ethereum standard as much as possible. Right. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We see like a thing going on there and a lot of players. And it wouldn't make sense for us to just say, okay, we'll compete with Facebook on our own new brand blockchain, completely build it from scratch.
Actually, I mean, going back to sort of the notion of tokens and the minting of tokens and the value of these things. There's one thing I still don't quite understand, which is if I'm setting up in a studio, setting up a wallet that users can use in my community, and I want to issue tokens that are stablecoin. To me, it makes a sense in my head that you can issue these because they have an inherent value, right? They're pegged to a fiat currency, more or less. How does it work if I want to create a new token? Because this is an option that you offer.
Yeah.
How do I establish the value of this? Is it just that I have to sell them to consumers and that establishes the value, or how do we work out what the value of a new created token is?
So actually, this is you touched on the thing that might be the most complicated to explain, but I will try to simplify it. Okay. You create a currency and you can say this is $1 to $1. Why would you want that? Because consumers, they don't really know what's DAI or USDC or USDT, and you don't want to push them to shove crypto down their throats. In the end of the day, they want to use dollar. Maybe they get a cashback and they get it in special bucks, my bucks, mark dollars or something like that.
The car bucks we talked about earlier, didn't we, for the car wash?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just a simple example, McCoins. I don't know if you have McCoins. McDonald's does like a physical coin that they give you. You can buy a meal with it.
Not at the moment.
Actually, we have it here, and they have like a nice website, and you can collect those coins and pay with them. And this is a great example because it has a fixed value in dollars. You can create those types of systems, but where it gets complicated is when it's not fixed, when it's changing, when you start to think about, okay, maybe I'll give people that do transactions in specific hours more money. Maybe it's the more people use it, the higher the price goes. Maybe as a collective, right? This thing rewards you the more people you invite, or and you can really design those systems really easily because you're actually using real dollars. Somebody needs to deposit those dollars. The fact that it's backed by another currency, that's all transparent to the user. Okay. If I want to create a loyalty system that is 100% backed by dollars, by fiat, I can do it with crypto. That's really cool part. So basically, you're sending money to people, they can actually cash it out, they can actually exchange it to a different currency. There's actual value to those tokens. It's not funny money. Yeah. So from one hand, it starts to be interesting. From the other hand, it starts to be complicated. And this is why I think crypto is so intriguing and confusing at the same time, because it's not intuitive for people to think like a central banker. Central banker doesn't have like the tools that you have as a programmer that builds contracts. So, and this is real. I'm talking with central banks, and they're doing a lot of research. It's all a lot of economic theory on a macro scale. But here you can actually think about something simple and implement it and let people use it. Let's say every time somebody buys, the price goes up by 0.5%. Anybody sells, the price goes down. If there's more users cashing out, the price goes down. If there's more users topping up, the price goes up. Or it can just give you a way to earn a specific percentage every month based on the activity. It goes on and on.
Yeah. So the thing is that the options really are very wide. Like you can actually set it up to accrue value in almost any way that you want. Then.
Yeah, and it's not like I'm crazy and I imagine people will use this. There's actually quite a lot of competitors in the space because you're making something very useful, approachable to everybody at a very cheap cost. So it's open source code. It costs a few dollars to launch. Anybody can create his own currency. So naturally, you have a lot of platforms, a lot of builders, and some of them are really focusing on an infrastructure. Some of them are really trying to think about a model. For instance, Patreon, if you know Patreon.
Yes. Yeah.
For YouTubers, they can get like a support from the crowd. I'm guessing Patreon is taking like 20% or something like that. So that's really something you can avoid. If you want,
if you were a YouTuber, you could create your own Patreon and create your own currency.
There's a company that does social currencies, and they have a specific model. So if you ask them how your model works, it starts to be very, very straightforward. I'm minting 5,000 coins. Everybody can buy the coins. I'm setting an initial price. And then at certain milestones, we're releasing more and more and more. And it's a one-size-fits-all solution for anybody that is using this Patreon alternative. So here you monetize your followers, and you're not doing it by going through platforms that take a lot of percentages. So you can create an Uber really in a straightforward way. You need payments and reputation, and you have Uber. Payments and reputation, and you have Airbnb. And you can remove their 30% that they take. So those really are you don't really need to go and build like a crazy model. Only like taking an existing model and remove the 30% is also possible using those systems.
Wow. So it's a replacement for all kinds of things where there's a high cost of use at the moment. And then it's also it's a way for people to access blockchain without having to understand or code it or whatever. They can just set something up.
the same fiat ramps, on ramps and off ramps that you have in Ethereum could be used to buy a token from you that will be a Patreon alternative. And if you think about it, Patreon is nice, but how about something that works in all jurisdictions? Let's say even without credit cards. Or, you know, depends on the channel, but definitely Patreon is not something that people, like, all the world knows about. But even if you go to, like, it really goes on and on and on. Like the models you can build. This is why we call them franchises. That if you succeed building one, you can really replicate it across pretty much everywhere.
Well, just on that basis, actually, or on that topic rather, you've reminded me of the question where I think for a lot of people, it would be confusing to work out, like, how does Fuse kind of make money, or how does Fuse plan to make money in the future if you're not sort of you're not collecting, storing, monetizing data, which is the way, you know, we used to companies making money today, and your transaction fees are so low that, you know, you're not going to be making massive profits from that. So what do you see? What's your vision for the future in terms of where you're going to bring value back to your investors, and where you're going to see some profits?
Yeah. So as everything, if you go to VCs nowadays and ask them to build something like that, I want to make it really cheap. I want to make it open source. They'll probably tell you you're out of your mind. Because VCs know one thing really well. They know SaaS, and this is the model that they know how to evaluate and price, and there's benchmarks. And here we're really trying to tackle something very ambitious with a very different approach that is really inspired by how Ethereum started, and Tezos, and all the big projects. And naturally, it's very different inception than Visa. It's the thing that we're looking at with this space is that the business model is changed. That's true innovation. And creating another SaaS company is not innovative. Another credit card vendor, or another protocol for EMV cheap payments and on top of credit cards. I think our approach was really different from the start. We said we want people to make a lot of transactions because we want to have a lot of economic activity and data. And that will attract companies that will build on it. And the proxy to realize that it's working is that we see more and more value locked on the network. And if you have $1 million locked on the network, you can offer a lot of services other than transaction fees. So when you move your assets into Fuse, automatically a world of features opens up to you. You get backend APIs, which we can charge money for, like any other API provider. You can even charge money on moving on the bridge, moving assets on the bridge, which is something a lot of projects do. If you have $1 million on the network, and you have service providers on the network, and you have a healthy ecosystem, you have a lot of stuff you can sell, because Fuse is not one company; it's really a network. And this is why we call ourselves the Fuse network from day one, because you can fork the wallet, you can fork the studio, you can fork the code, but you can't fork the network. That's the only thing. Like the heart of this business model is the way that we collect all those players together, building on the network, offering services on the network, participating in the governance, and align them in a single mission, and really focus on the long tail of communities that would want to use this infrastructure. Not developers, maybe not in like New York or London, but in places that are that want to retain some value, because they don't want to all the money leave the economy, and other places that just don't have a banking infrastructure. So that's like a really different approach, in my opinion. So that's, I hope it answers your question about the business model. So there's a lot of moving
Oh,
parts.
no, I think so. Yeah, there's all these potential. Once you've got this ecosystem in place, there's potential for all these extra services that can be offered.
Yeah.
And then for those you would charge, in a very, I guess, very sort of transparent way. If you want this service, then that's this. If you want this service, it's this. And then you have a whole medley of services eventually that can be offered on the network.
Exactly. It's a bit like when you see crypto space in general, Bitcoin, the narrative is hodl, don't touch your money, don't move it. If you look at the amount of Bitcoin holders and the amount of on-chain activity, you see that people are not really using crypto. It's really, you buy it and forget it and hope you didn't lose your private keys.
Yeah, it's like buying gold or something, right? So it's
yeah. And
like a defensive investment.
Exactly, and this is why decentralized finance or DeFi is really focused on one measurement, and it's to measure health, like if the economy is healthy or the product is working. The proxy for that is how much value is locked. And I think this narrative is important because it's not measuring stuff like we're the blockchain with the most transactions, with the most users, because it's really easy to fake. People realized really fast that the amount of transactions or charging a fee, not necessarily the best approach, but lying about how much value is locked, it's impossible. So if you're putting one ETH, everybody will see it. There's no way to hide it. But if you move this ETH back and forth between both of your private accounts, you generated fake volume. So it's a different metric. I think it deserves a different, like this space deserves new business models if you really want to do innovation.
Well, I think we should finish up in a second. You've been very kind with your time. I think if we finish up with a question like future growth for the Fuse network, something that you mentioned to me before recording is that you're aiming for, I think, 1 million transactions per day on the Fuse network in, between 2 to 3 years from now. So how do you expect to get there? How do you think you're going to reach that?
Yeah, so we're building something that you can say it's a funnel, where at the beginning of the funnel we get all non-technical entrepreneurs and companies and people that manage communities, manage fan clubs, manage marketplaces, retailer, large and small. We want all of them to be able to reach us, to use the product. It's self-service. Just like Stripe customers, basically similar to what I see as our customers. Those are the startups, the builders behind the scenes that want to do something very complicated with a few steps. And in jurisdictions that are maybe, maybe there's no alternatives at all. For instance, Africa, or even in Europe in some places, it's funny. You don't necessarily have alternative to cash. So we start feeding this funnel, and in the end, we go through and talk with everybody that are using the product, and we're choosing places where, and of course, we offer a lot of help. We have a network of developers that we put in the mix. We choose where to put our focus, and currently we have 10 like high quality pilots that we plan to grow. But by the end of this year, we plan to be at 100. So those 10 were without any interviews or marketing. We never did any of this until now. So we think it's possible to do 10x on this by the end of the year. So bring 100 communities. And for 100 communities, you need to feed the funnel with 10,000 people or something like that will start the process and evaluate the product. And I think if you make it useful for non-developers, you automatically increase the amount of people that can use it by 100. Sure. And we're offering a way to build those local systems and make money for the operators. This is part of the vision. We want those companies to thrive. If they will thrive, they will pay Fuse more and more money. So it's not really, it's like a very straightforward, in line with the capitalist approach, but it's lowering barriers. And this is the really, the decentralization is here to really be able to bring fuse to those places.
Well, that's great. Thanks again for your time, Mark. It's been a fascinating discussion, very eye-opening for me, and I hope for viewers as well. So yeah, thank you again.
Thank you very much.
If you made it to the end of this video, please leave a comment or a question below. I'd love to know what you think about some of the topics we've discussed here today. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and sharing it, and do subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with all my videos as they go live. Thank you so much for watching, and stay curious.